There's a strange moment that happens when you dig deep into old agricultural records. Every once in a while you find a trick that somehow slipped through the cracks of modern gardening, not because it didn't work, but because it worked so quietly that nobody bothered to write a flashy headline about it. Yet the people who used it, early homesteaders, trench gardeners, and even pre-industrial farmers, swore by it. And one of the most fascinating of these forgotten techniques is a fermentation method that turns ordinary kitchen scraps into a microbial powerhouse that no rodent will ever dare to touch. If you've ever had raccoons, rats or mice tear open your compost bin, this will feel like revenge served with scientific precision. Now, before we go further, this is where I need your full attention for the next minute. Because this is one of those methods that sounds simple on the surface, but the logic behind it reveals something far more interesting about how our ancestors understood decay, fermentation, and soil life. If you've been following the channel for a while, you already know that many old-world techniques turn out to be more advanced than we give them credit for. And this one is no different. The fermented scrap method is faster than composting, safer than burying raw food waste, and powerful enough to rebuild depleted soils without attracting a single pest. By the time you finish this guide, you'll know exactly how to use it in your garden, why it works so well, and how it connects to centuries of forgotten agricultural wisdom. Let's start with the heart of the method, because the secret is in the fermentation. When you take kitchen scraps, vegetable peels, leafy trimmings, spent fruit, even stale grains, and submerge them in a controlled anaerobic environment, something remarkable happens. Instead of rotting in the traditional sense, the scraps undergo a microbial takeover driven by lactic acid-producing bacteria. These microorganisms digest the material while releasing organic acids that sharply lower the pH. To rodents, that acidic smell is a hard no. They won't chew through it, they won't dig it up, and they won't raid your buckets in the middle of the night. But to plants, that acid phase is only temporary. Once you introduce the fermented material into soil, those acids quickly neutralize, leaving behind a slurry loaded with pre-digested nutrients and thriving microbial life. The method is straightforward, though it feels almost too effective for how little effort it demands. You fill a sealed container with chopped kitchen scraps. The key is pressing the scraps down so there's no trapped air, then adding a small amount of starter. Anything from a splash of unpasteurized vinegar brine to a spoonful of yogurt whey, to the liquid from a jar of naturally fermented vegetables. Once sealed, the container begins the anaerobic phase. Within just a few days, a sour, pickled aroma forms. That scent is proof that the lactic acid bacteria have taken over. By 2 weeks, the scraps have softened and partially broken down. They won't resemble compost. Instead, they look like food that has been pickled, which is exactly what has happened. To those who have dealt with rodents for years, this is a turning point. Rodents are attracted to proteins and sugars, especially in raw or decomposing scraps. But the fermentation alters both the chemical signature and the taste, making the scraps inedible to them. This is why this method became so valuable in early homesteads, where food waste couldn't simply be thrown out, and compost piles often sat just a few paces from livestock barns or grain stores. The farmers didn't know the molecular details, but they understood that acidic fermented scraps disappeared into the soil without attracting vermin. So, how exactly do you use the fermented material? You have two main approaches, both historically grounded and both highly effective. The first is trench application. Dig a shallow trench along a planting row, add a thin layer of the fermented scraps, cover it with several inches of soil, and leave it to finish breaking down. Within a couple of weeks, the soil microbes neutralize the acidity, and by planting thyme, the trench has become a nutrient-rich corridor running directly under the root zone. People growing heavy-feeding crops like tomatoes, corn and squash see dramatic improvements because the nutrients are already in a form the soil can easily process. The second method is slurry application, which works well in containers or raised beds. You simply blend the fermented scraps with water until it forms a thick liquid, then pour or fold it directly into the topsoil. This method actually mirrors the way early settlers used sour mash and fermented waste from food preservation, you know. It works faster because the surface area increases, allowing soil microbes to access the nutrients more quickly. A practical example might help make this more concrete. Let's say you have a raised bed with soil that feels tired. The plants grow, but they don't thrive. Instead of spending money on synthetic fertilizers, you take 2 liters of fermented kitchen scraps, blend them with an equal volume of water, and pour the mix into the bed. Within 2 to 3 weeks, the bed has noticeably more earthworm activity, moisture retention improves, and the soil smells alive again. This happens because the fermented material acts like a microbial starter culture for the entire bed. You're not just feeding the plants, you're feeding the soil community. Even better, this method works year-round, even in colder climates. Fermentation doesn't rely on warm temperatures the way traditional composting does. A sealed bucket ferment can continue slowly even in a cool garage or shed, which is why homesteaders favoured it in winter months when outdoor compost piles froze solid. By this point, you can probably see why this method deserves a place in any self-reliance toolkit. It keeps pests away, breaks down food waste quickly, enriches soil, and requires no special equipment. It's one of those quiet, proven techniques that gets overlooked because it doesn't look dramatic on the surface. Yet, year after year, those who use it consistently see richer soil and healthier plants. If you found this guide useful, I'd love for you to subscribe to Hydro Haven and share this video with someone who enjoys digging into forgotten agricultural wisdom. It helps the channel grow, and it makes sure these old methods stay alive for gardeners who truly appreciate them.